All right. So now that we have gone through essentially what is a project, where you create your repo or your project, you set up the basic configurations and connections and environments, you create your pipeline, and you configure your pipeline schedule, connections, variables, and then you create your assets. And now it's time to actually run the whole thing. So when we speak of a run, it basically means a single execution of the pipeline. It's a single instance of that pipeline that is actually running, and it can be either a single asset or all of the assets running, or a single asset with only its upstreams or only its downstreams, depending on the lineage. And any version or any instance of these cases is called a run. And how you can go ahead and do that is by running the command Bruin run. Let me actually clear here. So Bruin run, and then you want to give it the name of the pipeline. So in our case, we have NYC taxi. And if you run the YAML file, this will run the entire pipeline. So let's go ahead and do that. And it's starting to run the entire pipeline. I will close it right now because we don't want to actually run the pipeline. And we ran it for the wrong dates anyways. It won't work. But at the very basic level, if you want to create a run of the entire pipeline, you just do Bruin run and give it the name of the pipeline and the pipeline YAML. This is not defining any tags. It's not saying which environment to use. It's not saying if to do a full refresh or anything else. So at the very basic level, it's really just running run with all the default configurations in here. However, if you want to go and, for example, you want to set the start and end date. So in our case, let's just default this to the last interval. Let's say we want to do a full refresh. We want the exclusive end dates. And we only have one environment, so we will leave that as it is. And we also have the variable overrides. So if I go and create a run now, we are on this asset. So if I were to actually click this, it's just going to run this asset, and it won't run the entire pipeline. You can, from here, select from the dropdown, select to run the whole pipeline, or you can run this pipeline with this asset with its downstream, or you can select specific assets to run them as well. In our case, let's go ahead and actually create a run for the entire pipeline. And let's say full refresh, exclusive date, and let's set the end date manually to also 2020 February. And if I click run now, it will run the entire pipeline, which I will actually. And in the meantime, let's go from the drop down here, copy the command so we can take a look at so we had a failure, but it has to do with my connections, which is not relevant, but we will just want to go ahead one by one and look at these different tags included in this command here, just to learn a little bit better what each command means. So, all right. So we have our Bruin run, which is creating a run instance, and then we are setting our start date and our end date. And we also pass the full refresh, which is important for materialization. So if this was not here, and let's say you have an asset where the materialization is insert only, the result of a query will only be inserted. However, when you pass a full refresh, it will drop the table, recreate it with the result of that query. We have our variable tag here, which will override the variables that we defined previously with the ones that we are defining here. And then you also set the environment. So the environment is right now set to default. So in this case here, the default was what we defined in the Bruin YAML file, but normally you will have dev, prod, sandbox, and other types of environments. And then lastly, you want to just give it the path of the specific pipeline that you want to run. Relative path works most of the times, but it's always safer to give a full path to make sure that you're running the correct pipeline. All right. And lastly, we also have another Bruin command that you will most likely want to get familiar with is Bruin validate. So Bruin validate will go and assess the pipeline based on its lineage to make sure there's no, for example, circular dependencies or there's any wrong or broken dependencies to make sure that the configurations and the definitions of assets are correct, to make sure that the connections defined in the pipeline and in the Bruin YAML environments is correct and working. So it goes ahead and kind of validates everything to make sure that once you actually create a run, it will run and work. So in our case, if we run the Bruin validate, we see that we don't have any issues. The previous issue that we saw when we ran the pipeline was not something Bruin related. It had to do with the actual the keys provided for the for our database. So in this case, it failed because I'm not actually passing a real mother duck token. So that's why it failed. And there is a way to also test these. There is a command for making sure that your connections are working. But for now, we can skip over that. All right. So looking at the entire project, you have your project folder where you git initialize it. You have your Bruin YAML configurations and environments and secrets and connections set up. And then you have your pipelines where you set up their schedules, the connections, the configurations, variables, defaults, all the other things. And then within your pipelines, you have a set of assets, and inside each asset, you define the asset, you determine what it does, what type of asset it is, the metadata of the asset, and then you provide some content. So whether it's a SQL query, whether it's a Python script, you define the actual code that you wanted to execute. And you have some variables, whether they are built in or custom, that you can define and pass into your project. And lastly, you have your commands, which are to run the pipeline, validate the pipeline, check out specific things. For example, you can even query the pipeline, query the tables, and a whole list of other commands that you can use as well. But these commands are basically what the Bruin CLI tool provides, and all the other things that we set up previously are essentially helping the commands understand what to do, where to go find your files, how to run them, and how to create the entire pipeline execution. All right, so that concludes this video. I hope you learned about the Bruin concepts and the basics about what a project looks like and what is a pipeline, what is an asset, and how to navigate your Bruin projects. Thank you.